Big test for Utah coming off that UCLA win. They've got to turn right around and go to Corvallis. The Beavs, of course, coming off that loss to Washington State. What do we think comes out of this big-time Pac-12 game?
You know, we talked about this game on Monday, or Utah on Monday, talked about how they're undefeated. They're beaten up. They're flying under the radar. Nobody's talking about them. There's another thing about Utah that we have to mention. And we talked about a team earlier in this show.
Oh, it's just Iowa with different colors.
Correct.
Okay, trade out black and gold for red and white. Utah is Iowa, 100%. All the way down to the defensive touchdowns.
And can that go on the road on a short week and play another good Oregon State team that offensively has been, hasn't been great, but they can run the ball. Utah's run defense hasn't been spectacular so far this season. This is going to be the most interesting Utah game I think we found, because I expected last week's game to be a lot better against UCLA with Dante Moore and that very good UCLA defense coming in, although I think the Utah game does also skew those numbers a little bit. But it obviously didn't happen. The Musts got to Dante Moore and the Bruins pick six in the first play, and it was pretty much a wrap from that point. So now the Utes are going on the road to play Oregon State. We're going to learn a whole hell of a lot more about the Utes in this game than we have to any point this season. And also, is this the week Cam Rising comes back, bud? Have you been monitoring the point spread for any signs of his return?
We are monitoring the situation. At this point, I think the point spread implies that he's either out or hurt, like playing but hurt. Maybe not 100%. Corvallis is worth something, certainly, but a 100% health Cam Rising makes Utah a better team than Oregon State, right? What game was it last year that Utah didn't have Cam Rising for, by the way?
It was Washington State.
Well, the Pac-12 championship. Or no, they had him then. What game was it?
I'm pretty sure it was Washington State.
It was one of them Pac-2 schools.
I actually kind of like Oregon State's matchup here. Oregon State, all credit to Washington State, as we gave them on the Monday show and the Sunday night show. Like, their passing game is legitimately really good. Oregon State's defensive backs were also a bit of a disappointment to me. And I don't know that Utah, but especially without Rising, are like perfectly suited to take advantage of that. And so far, Utah's defense has played out of its mind without some of its top guys. But you've also had some major problems from the opposing offenses. Obviously, Dante Moore, freshman, going in to Utah is extremely tough. Florida just completely I know Florida's offense is not great, but like it's better than what it showed at Utah, and they just completely self-destructed. Like it was immature. They had a bunch of false starts and penalties and whatnot. I do generally trust Oregon State's offense to play a relatively clean game, even if I don't think DJU is the silver bullet for that offense. So if Cam doesn't play, I do think this is where kind of the Cinderella run for shorthanded Oregon or shorthanded Utah stops.
I'm glad you mentioned DJU, because he came out of the gates firing. It was like, oh, this is a great spot for him. Clemson was struggling. Like, see who made the mistake? Maybe the problem was both. Like the combination of DJ and Clemson with an offense that we saw last year were a part of the problem, because the last two games he hasn't played great. Now that he's played against a little bit better competition, under 50%, both of those games, more interceptions than touchdowns. This to me has to be a DJU game where he steps up, because I don't think they're going to run the ball as effectively as they typically do against most opponents, because Utah's front seven is like, yeah, keep running it at us all day long. Nate Johnson, I mean, this to me is one of the stories of the season, because they're winning without Cam Rising. I mean, this is Kyle Whittingham playing with house money, being like, we're undefeated and we haven't had our guy who I do think is a big difference maker for that offense. I think it's really interesting to see if he does try to play, or like Bud has talked about, do they try to, just hold him out for that bye? When's the bye week? Is it 1 more week or 2 more weeks for the bye week?
I think it's 2 more weeks for Utah.
Yeah. Like, do they,
it's the week after this, I believe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
It's the week after.
Like, do they try to sneak in one more, and I don't know. I do think he could be the difference in this one, or I think you're going to see extremely ugly, low-scoring game.
It is. The bye week is after this week. And then when they get back into action on October 14th, it's Cal, but then at USC, Oregon home, Arizona State, then at Washington. So in a 4-week period, they're at USC, home Oregon, at Washington. If you think that the extra week is going to be able to have Cam Rising at 100%, that is when the Pac-12 title race will be decided, is when all those teams are playing each other. Because some of those other ones, the Oregon-Washington game is a little bit later on in the season too. So should be a crucial time if you think you're going to be able to continue to good Iowa this, not necessarily, 2023 Iowa this.
I can't help but think, but like Chip, in the last few years, you would talk about, when Clemson was in a big game, you would talk about big game Dabo.
Yeah, conservative.
I can't help but think of big game DJ and how he has performed in some of those games. And like Danny, you mentioned the last 2 weeks, here are the numbers. He's 31 of 64 for 482, 2 touchdowns and 3 interceptions. That is the DJU that we saw at Clemson far too often. So this is a big game. I think this is a big moment for him. And I do think, if he has a good game, Oregon State could win this one, obviously. But the thing that I really think they have to go for is, even though maybe it's what Utah wants you to do, I think they have to lean on the run game, because with Damian Martinez, that is what they're best at. And if you look at it, it's part of the reason they're able to score, because they are the number 1 red zone offense right now. They have scored touchdowns on 92.7% of their red zone possessions, whereas Utah ranks 14th nationally, only allowing touchdowns 40%. So that is going to be a crucial part of this game. Can Oregon State not only move the ball against this defense on the ground, but can they finish drives in that spot? Can DJU make plays to get them in the end zone? Because Utah is not going to give you a lot of scoring opportunities. You have to take advantage of it. But on the flip side, Utah is probably not going to have as many scoring opportunities as we've seen them in the past if Cam Rising is once again out, because they haven't shown the ability to do it yet this year. So it's going to be a very interesting game. I think it's going to be low scoring. I think it's going to be close, and it could just come down to somebody making who makes the fewest mistakes might leave this one on Friday night. And that tends to happen on these short week games.
We spent a lot of time talking about Ole Miss. There was a question in the chat about why LSU Ole Miss was not included. I will be fully transparent. I feel like we have just been bagging on Ole Miss. Okay. We were dogging them going into the Alabama game. We dogged them in the instant reaction show. We continued to just pick this group apart. Do you think that we see a circle the wagons Saturday in Oxford as Lane Kiffin gets the boys fired up with LSU in town?
So we're all just tired of Ole Miss too. Like
what?
Doesn't that feel like a locks play? Give any away early.
Oh, I will be attacking that game, but it's from a specific angle. I'm not going to take the 2.5 because I do not trust LSU as far as I could throw it.